All right, welcome guys to another webinar, Evolve Ministry, a community for cultivating our connection to the universe. And the last webinar, and I'm not going to go too much into detail what it was, but our theme in this webinar would closely resemble what we spoke before, and it's about this universal connection that Evolve Ministry, the staff and the students and the practitioners that are practicing this universal connection. We're documenting this through our telekinesis, hydrokinesis videos, and then all the other external phenomena that we can actually produce through this connection. Now, when it comes to the universal connection, it's not an easy thing to do for most people. Some people just find it impossible, so they become skeptics and they don't believe in it. But essentially it's because this culture that we're growing up in is very much disconnected. We're not really connected on the most fundamental way. And the fundamental connection, the one factor that really connects us is unconditional love. It is this vibration that our entire universe is already oscillating at. Every inanimate object, every animal and tree is not harboring egoic thoughts against us, is not trying to work against us or against the system. It's apparently human beings and their conditioning in this culture that pretty much operate not in harmony with their environment. And so most people, if not all, in this Western civilization experience this disconnection every day. If not all day, most people would just fluctuate between a connection and a disconnection. It's periods of time when you're connected and sometimes you're not connected. And we're living in this world of polarity where we're feeling good and sometimes we're feeling bad. And we're alternating between those. So the main key that I've found to actually establishing this connection is unconditional love. And I don't know if everybody else had that type of experience. Can anybody else validate it for me? Yeah? Daniel, you are one of our staff members, instructors. Let's unmute you. What do you think?
I want to hear someone else first, if you don't mind.
Okay. All right. Well, Josh, you were mentioning with your nodding that you do agree. I unmuted you. Can you say something about that?
Oh yeah. Without unconditional love, you can't really gain access, because if your love is limited in any way, it's not unconditional, you're not going to gain as deep of an access or as fluid of a connection.
Well said. I agree with that. Now that you said that, Daniel, you wanted to say something yourself?
Yeah. So, yeah, you touched on an important part there, both of you, but what you just said, Josh, about access, that is so true, because if we are trying to vibrate at a higher frequency, then we will be able to have more access. If we continue to be in a lower vibrational, non-unconditional loving state, then we lose access, we lose knowledge. And so through unconditional love, we can not only, build our connection with the universe, but we build our connection with ourselves, with other people. It seems to benefit all aspects of our life. And I mean, if you notice, when you're in a negative state, you're not in a very loving state, things typically get worse. You'll see that in your environment. You'll have one thing go wrong after another. And if you've noticed, when you're in a happy state, it's the opposite. You have opportunities, you see things much brighter, you're more loving towards yourself and towards everyone else. And if you are practicing self-mastery, you start noticing how the external world responds to you. Like you walk up to a tree and wind starts, or you are outside walking and you see a squirrel. Sometimes when you're truly connected, the squirrels don't run away and they will come up to you. They like want to be around you. So the unconditional love is the basis of, well, one, what we teach at Evolve Ministry, but two, it's the basis of evolution. So through that love, you're not in the ego. Through that love, you can discover new parts of yourself, get rid of the ones that don't serve you anymore, and, you know, kind of be on your way. So it's a evolutionary progression, I guess would be a good way of putting it.
Yeah, well said. I agree with that. It's definitely if anybody here is tuning into this universal connection for the first time, whether it's who's ever here or anybody who's listening to a webinar for the first time and picked this webinar of all, the universal connection is something that when you practice it, some really fascinating and sometimes people can describe it as weird, strange phenomena around us occur. Like Daniel, you mentioning animals start coming out from nowhere. The wind picks up and trees respond to your magnetic field. It's kind of like we have a field of our own and they have a field, and when it collides, there's an exchange of information and they become aware of us. And so when we work with this universal connection, as Daniel was mentioning, sometimes we don't have that connection. Sometimes it's not as good, and because of that, we can have a cascade of events that occur that we end up just having the most terrible experience, and we get that experience on us, and it sort of gets locked as a memory in us, and we store it as a trauma in us. And we will visit this idea of trauma plenty of times throughout this series, because essentially one thing that our body and our psyche does is that it acquires experiences and stores it as memory, and this memory can have an associative. It can have a bad perception towards that experience, the memory, or a good one, uplifting one or non-uplifting one. That's something that would bring us down. And when we access that memory, we access all kinds of memories all day long. And we were talking about unconditional love as this basis of our connection, because everything else is already in that vibration. We ourselves, we're not. We're oscillating within this large spectrum of emotions that we can have, but we don't always generate intentionally within us, within our body, this emotion, this feeling that can connect us, like we are connecting to the universe through this port that we have with our chakras that hooks into the universe. And if we use this unconditional love, it actually establishes that port connection, this high-speed internet, or wireless internet, to the universe, exchange of information, and then they get the better signal of our intentions. Matthew, you were saying realizing energy work is more about a connection than power. Would it still be fair to say that unconditional love is the most powerful force in the universe? I would say, if I would just give my opinion right now, strongest, Daniel's saying, but if I would say anything, well, unconditional love is this underlying force. And it's more like a vibration that we're entering in. And the force itself is the willpower that we use. It's the power. The unconditional love is more that like the channel that we enter. Like we have a TV set, and we can go throughout all the channels. We can go to channel hate, channel romantic love, and we can see erotic love. We can see happiness channels. We can see sorrow, fear, and people enter all kinds of different channels throughout the day, and that affects their experience. It affects how they see things afterwards as well, because we sort of soak up what we experience, and we sort of what happens to us in a neurological sense when we look at somebody on television is that we identify with it, and we not only identify with it, but we take a portion of what we see and we embody it ourselves. So we end up going and enacting that ourselves because our nervous system wants to discharge it in a healthy manner. So we want to enact it. But in a sense, that's how I see it in regards to what you were asking. Did that answer your question in my perspective? Thank you, Matt. You said well said. Daniel, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, sure. Like I had typed out, I said the strongest. From my experience, we have a lot of emotions, as you were talking about, on different channels, Joel. And so how I see it is we can have whatever our strongest channel is, it's usually the thing that we pay attention to the most. So, you know, some people are angry all the time. They're more angry than anything else. That's their strongest force. But if you ever notice, you can be angry or sad. You see a puppy and you lighten up. You see a dog or a baby and you lighten up. You see a beautiful sunset, you lighten up. And that is the force of love and positivity and harmony. It's like, I mean, I would say yes, it's the strongest force. I wouldn't necessarily say powerful, because I don't necessarily like the word powerful. But strongest force, it's the thing that can overpower, or not overpower, but transmute any negativity, transmute any ill will, transmute the negative into the positive. But I would like to say this, and I've said this before, we have to choose that. So if we continuously choose unconditional love, it'll become stronger in our life, and you'll start to see that actual force. You'll start to see how it operates in your life. So for me, I would say yes, unconditional love is the strongest force in the universe, at least that I have experienced.
Okay, I agree with that. And I mean, when it comes to discussion of what are the keys for the universal connection, we have explored this unconditional love. But it's not as easy as that. Do you guys agree with that? I mean, is there another factor within us that has to be explored that has, well, I mean, the unconditional love would be something that we want to work daily to establish through meditation and through training to bring up within us all the time. But in our society, is there something that you guys find that we all have and that this factor is very much influences our perception and influences our connection? Yeah, as Matt's saying, ego. That is very true. It is the ego. And Matt, you guys are not familiar, but he is another teacher of ours on our school. He's bringing us his music school courses that will teach us more to connect to the harmony of sound. And wow, there's so much to say about that. I'm sure he's bottling to say something more about it. But back to this discussion about the key that does so much for us. And the unconditional love gives us that connection. But, well, we're always walking throughout this day in our lives and interacting with so many people. And what ends up happening is that at some point we're let down. At some point something's frustrating. At some point somebody is forcing down our beliefs, their beliefs on us. They're forcing their opinions, and they're telling us how to run our lives. and we've been told all our lives to operate in a certain way. And because of that, we have pretty much matured a sort of false sense of reality that is not does not enforce this connection, but enforces a disconnection. And there's this ego that we have. But what is the ego? Does anybody have a good definition for ego? Yeah, Josh. I muted you. Go ahead.
I would think of the ego as like a machine, right? There's no particular spirit behind it. It's more like an automatic machine, just operating on the basics. For example, when I walk down the streets, I see all the power lines and such, and I know that like how much of an ego kind of thing that is, because it really illustrates the illusion that someone's controlling power, but that's not how it is. But because that's the way it seems, that whole exchange of ideas in that reality, in that situation, really illuminates the ego within our society, because really energy is free and it's inherently abundant.
All right. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Does anybody else have a different definition? What about you, Jacob?
I'll tell you the truth.
What? I can't hear you.
Nothing I can really think of off the top of my head, to tell you the truth. I'm not too sure. That's a good question. I can't really put it into words how to define it out of my own words. But I'm not too sure, man. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
It's cool. No worries. It's actually common to come across people in our daily life who are not aware of what the ego is and how to define it, and because of that, they're not aware from what place they are interacting with others, or from where they are actually expressing themselves or making their choices. Anybody else wants, before I say my perception, my opinion? Yeah.
I'd probably say it's more like I guess this is where the word control would come into play, is more a lack of control of ourselves and our emotions.
Can you give me an example?
Like lust, perhaps. You can't. Some people just can't. It just happens for them, and they just can't. They don't have any technique to really suppress it or do anything to deal with it. It just kind of, they let it go, and it kind of consumes them in a way.
Yeah, that is an important point to make. Yeah, I would agree that in many cases people perceive the ego as a portion of ourselves that we don't really have control, or that actually controls us, and kind of drives us or urges us to go for certain things out of habit, and bad habits sometimes, and creating this karma of our action leads to certain type of repercussion that is not that pleasant. It's not so comfortable. And Daniel, do you have a definition for it?
Yes. Well, we're taught in school that the ego is our identity. And so, I'm Daniel, you're Joel, I'm a shuttle driver, I'm a self-mastery teacher, I'm a yogi, I'm a guitarist. It's like we have these identities of who we think we are. Then we have these identities that society puts on us. Like, I have dreads, so I'm a hippie. I smoke pot. I do all of this stuff, which in actuality, I don't call myself a hippie. I don't smoke pot. I don't drink. I don't I mean, I don't really do substances, but, you know, if you get to know me, you get to understand who I am. Because a lot of people, because they see the dreads, think of us, they have a certain, I guess, first impression. But people who have gotten to know me see that I have certain values, I have certain morals, that I kind of teeter-totter between two different things rather than just like, you know, I used to be a vegan, I used to be a vegetarian, but views have changed through perspective and understanding how my body works. But when you put a label on yourself, that's the ego. And so I see it as this force, or like you said, a machine, an entity that is within all of us that does control us to some degree until we understand what it is. It's like we're all not bipolar, we're all multiple split personality. So we have the ego, and then we have ourselves. And so throughout the day, we have things that upset us, things that make us happy. And so if you just watch your thoughts and don't connect to them, like embrace them, believe that they're you, then you'll start to understand what are the egoic thoughts. You'll see when it starts to operate, and then you can take a different path, a different action, so you don't go into that loop. I will say, though, that the ego, a lot of people have a negative connotation on it. It's a polarity difference. So it provides a negative polarity some of the time, or a positive. Sometimes the positive is what we go towards, but it's actually feeding the ego rather than feeding our progression. And that usually ends with some kind of lesson where you're like, oh, I see how I've been egoic. But I guess the point I'm saying is that we have these two kind of personalities melded into who we are. But we don't want to get too attached to what the ego says or what I am. Like, we want to just kind of flow with what's going on. Like, does that make sense? I'm kind of getting going on a tangent, but
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think, like, as far as self-mastery goes, once you start noticing your patterns, change them immediately. I mean, I think we all fall into this, where we go into the pattern and we continue the cycle, or it starts a new cycle a little bit different. But once we realize we're in that cycle and the ego is in control, we can take that control back, or not control, but we can just choose a different action. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's well said. Thank you for sharing that. So Josh, you were saying in the chat that the ego can influence you more than you can influence the ego when you don't understand how it is operating. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I found that for me, when it came to my training with the ego, is that the ego seems to want to inject into your consciousness all these different urges. And you want to break these patterns, these habits, but they're sort of, each morning that you wake up, you're kind of surrounded with the same type of stimulus. So you have the same type of suggestions around your environment, leading you to pretty much wanting to have the same comfortable experience again, same kind of morning that you always wake up hoping to have. And that habit kind of is picked up by this ego mind that kind of realizes that's your preferences. So if that's your preferences, maybe I should just keep on feeding this to this self that is experiencing this reality, and I'll keep on looping it until I get a different programming, until I'm programmed to operate on a different pattern of actions. And if I would for a second now examine what I know about the ego is a portion of ourselves that interacts with society. It is, like Daniel was saying, it's the personality of ourselves. It's like we are just this being that is always what we are, like just simple living, simple interacting, just like a tree is simple in its place. But for us to actually interface and interact with society, with different people, and the mentalities of the civilization, this culture, we have to adopt certain types of beliefs about ourselves and about others. And so it kind of dictates how we'll operate from that standpoint. Our ego, and if you take a look, if you Google the word ego and you look for pictures of that on the Google images, you see that there's the ego is depicted in the middle, and on one side is the devil, and the other side is the angel. And sort of kind of like you're in the middle, that's your ego. It perceives, it's the perception, it's like the filtration, and it's either looking at this type of way from the evil type of way, or like the service to self type of perspective, or the service to others perspective. And you're in the middle here receiving both at the same time. Sometimes you can receive more of this because you've just been inclined to more of the service to self. So all the thoughts that would come to you as you're interacting with people, instead of thinking, oh, how I can help this person, you'll be thinking how I can rip them off, or how I can gain something, instead of thinking how I can give, how I can be part of things. And so it's always this kind of like different distortions of the self, trying to interact with the different experiences that we have in order to learn more about ourselves, and then from there on to evolve to the next experience and work from there onwards. That's what I see when it comes to the ego. Aside from that, I have had the chance, and I would like to share this with you guys. This will bring us into the next phase of our discussion. But I've been reading Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda's work. He's a yogi from India who came to America he came to the West back in the 1930s, 20s, and he brought yoga to the West here. He made it very popular, and he founded the Self-Realization Fellowship, and I've been reading some of his texts here and there. He wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, a well-known book, which is pretty much like, I think, every person who's seeking this whole idea of the universal connection will eventually discover Yogananda, because a lot of what he's writing about does resonate with the philosophy of this connection. He just doesn't talk about it like that. And so one of his verses is actually from his commentary book about the Bhagavad Gita. It's an ancient text. It's a story about a war that was happening, and it was it was on the verge of a war happening thousands of years ago. And there's all these different verses in the book. So Yogananda, in his commentary, he takes his verses and he kind of examines them. So this one verse, it's on page 91 of his book, volume 1, it goes into the ego. And what I'd like to read for you guys is, he talks about the 6 faults of the mentality identified ego. And he goes on and says, when the ego, or I, quote unquote, consciousness, has sided with the materialistic forces of creation, it is said to have 6 faults. Kama, which is lust. Well, I won't name the names in Sanskrit, but let's just say lust is 1. Anger, greed, delusion, pride, and envy. And so he talks about these different faults that the ego has. He goes on and says, only when man has conquered these does he acquire knowledge of his true soul nature. So in the sense of that, we can think that maybe the ego is this perception we have, but it's clouded by delusion, by this delusion of reality. And it's clouded because of these faults that we have, these faults that we gain from society, from how we were brought up. And so we have lust, we have anger, we have what was it? Greed, delusion, pride, and envy. We can talk a lot about it. Now, instead of going too deep because we can't cover all of them, I just want to examine one of them, which is lust. And then Tyler here, he brought it up. The idea of lust, let's go to the next page. This is where he says really good stuff. He says, lust applies to the abuse of any and all or all of the senses in the pursuit of pleasure or gratification. Through the sense of sight, man may lust after material objects. Do you guys agree with that? Through the sense of hearing, he craves the sweet, slow poison of flattery and vibratory sounds of the voices and music that arouse his material nature. Do you guys agree with that? Okay, we'll go on. Through the lustful pleasure of smell, he is enticed toward wrong environments and actions. Lust for food and drink causes him to please his taste at the expense of health. Do you guys experience that too? I would say, one of the biggest things today is like sugar. People just want to have that sweet tooth satisfied, and it could be an egoic thing. That's something to examine. Then he goes on and says, through the sense of touch, man lusts after inordinate physical comfort and abuses the creative sex impulse. That could be true. There's a lot of people out there, especially teenagers and mature and don't know much about sexuality. They have something that's urged that they feel that they need to satisfy it, and they'll do wrong things sometimes, like really wrong things. And I'm talking about some people out there would take advantage of women and maybe even rape just to satisfy that, and it comes from the ego. Lust also seeks gratification in wealth, status, power, domination. All that satisfies the I, me, and mine in an egoistical man. So we don't have to continue on, but I think you guys get the picture. And does anybody here have anything to say about that? A difficult thing to contemplate. Daniel, let's unmute you. Go ahead.
So basically, what I got from that is we have all of these things that we desire to fulfill our ego. So we have material objects, we have food, we have sex, we have anything else that could fall into any of those, or just the fact that we are almost constantly looking for the next fix. We're constantly trying to get the next desire fulfilled, I guess. But a lot of times these desires, like what you just mentioned, are egoic. They're for the self and only for the self. And so, more money, like we could all use a little bit more money, but do you need more money so you can buy nicer things? Do you need more money so you can get a better, fast, nice car? Like, you have to look at these things as to why you want these possessions. Will they better your life to better others? Or they better your life to make you more proud of your financial status? Or some people want a partner who is physically beautiful to what the standard is, just so it makes them feel better. But it might be a rotten person, So I think that a lot of those are pertinent, and I've seen that list plus maybe a little bit changed in other things that I've learned throughout my life as well. But I see that if we can overcome our desire, like I have an issue with sugar. Most people know that, but it's the desire for sugar isn't necessarily a desire for sugar. It's a desire for something sweet. And so, I go to fruit most of the time now rather than artificial sugar. which is better for my body. It makes me feel good, but it's, you know, it's still a desire. And so I think we need to look at what we desire or what we want, what we lust over, what we envy, why we get upset or whatever, because there's all of these things that, if you look at it in the long run, like, do you really have to have a cookie? Do you really have to have sex? Do you really have to get angry? Like, all of these things can be a choice that take us in a more I mean, I'm not saying sex is negative and like cookies are negative and all of that, but if we are looking to master ourselves, then one decision can be more for our progress versus the other, you know? So yeah, exactly right, Josh. Some desires can be more harmonious for the collective than others. And so I think with that, we need to look at what we actually desire and why. Is it egoic? Is it better for ourselves and better for everyone else? You know, because I want to have a lot of money, but I want that money to be used on a farm that I can grow food to feed other people, to help people learn how to grow their own food. Also, through that, I want to teach people self-mastery, because that's a lot of how I've built my connection is in the garden, because you are creating an environment. So all of that is basically under your control, under how well you are able to understand it. But again, if you grow thousands of pounds of food and you keep it for yourself, you know, it's only benefiting you. And so we have to take a conscious effort to make decisions that can be better for the whole. Sometimes we have to take care of ourselves. I understand that. But as far as these desires, we should see what is actually beneficial for progression, evolutionary, and progression towards a better collective world.
Yeah, well said. I mean, in this aspect of service to self and service to others, it's kind of hard in this. Let me just turn on my light here. It's getting dark. And we find that, how would I say it the best way, that we're in this situation where we're pursuing self-mastery and we're trying to learn about the ego, and as we're pursuing to better ourselves, is that we're realizing that a lot of our tendencies kind of were not the best, so we're trying to change them, but our environment doesn't change as swiftly as we are, as we want to. When we want to change, we'd like the environment to kind of complement us, and so we can take it along with us on our joyous ride of self-mastery, of bettering our environment. I mean, we want to evolve this planet or evolve our community, but when we realize that we found out about this universal connection, it's really difficult to actually bring other people to recognize it too, to recognize its significance. And that leads a lot of us to this deep emotion, situation of loneliness, of like, who can I talk about this? And if I want to pursue this, and I believe that it can actually bring us to the next evolutionary step, not just for ourselves, but for everybody else that we want to take with us on this beautiful ride, we tend to be in a situation of loneliness. If we don't have people in our close friend circles to go out and train. They want to go and smoke and drink and listen to music at pubs and just kind of continue their lifestyle. And that's cool. That's cool for them, but we tend to kind of dissociate from that because we tend to recognize how the ego operates, or the ego is actually enforced in those kind of situations. And that is what leads us to not acting from service to others. It causes us to disconnect from our environment because we're not operating in harmony anymore. And we want to operate from harmony, so it's kind of it feels like a double-edged sword to go into self-mastery, because it feels like it's an ordeal to get everybody and somebody else in our life to do it with us. And so loneliness, does anybody else here experience loneliness sometimes from practicing the universal connection? Yeah, Josh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, almost every day. Because especially when you say the words like, for example, universe, most people think of the universe in their own way, but when you have an actual established connection, it's completely different. Which it's not that you're any particularly different, but you are, on a sense, on another plane. Like your universe is vibrating at another frequency, so you probably are creating interference patterns with the people around you, creating this weird kind of lonely vibe because there's not really someone that's also around you that is connecting or around or on the same level.
Yeah, and do you find yourself sometimes reaching out to people because you want to introduce it to them? Josh? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Joey, I see that you're here too. Welcome, brother.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. I was having a hard time hearing. Just getting used to this phone. How's everything?
Wonderful. We're in the middle of discussion. We went through discussing about the universal connection being pretty much accessible through unconditional love as the basis. But then we went into the whole aspect of the ego, and we examined it. We kind of tried to define it across everybody and see what most of people understand it to be. And now we're at a point where we're just discussing how loneliness is a factor that kind of impacts our connection, impacts us as in our daily life, because we kind of want to bring that connection to other people and evolve our reality, but we feel like it doesn't want to. Do you experience the same thing?
Yes, actually, when it comes down to loneliness is more of what I would think is self-choice in my perspective. Because loneliness is because you want somebody's, depending on what loneliness you're talking about, like love, a girlfriend love, family love, somebody you just want to talk to, be open with, because everybody's not open-minded. So sometimes you just want to let your feelings out, and you don't have that person who you want to let that feelings out. That's always on a choice, in my perspective. I used to feel lonely. I used to feel like nobody wanted to listen to me, especially when it came down to when I joined the Evolve Ministry, AMI, and start understanding about the connection, the universal connection. I thought I wanted to share my knowledge with the whole world. I literally was crying out loud, like, please listen to me. But everybody's looking at me with a weird eye, like, yeah. Kind of weird. I'm like, yeah, man. I mean, I call it crazy talk, but it's true. But as I went in my journey and started to learn, I noticed and I observed that it's choice. We choose to feel that loneliness. In other words, that's connected to ego. You know, we choose that. We have a choice. We're not alone. We all are connected with each other, in my point of view. You know, and we either could choose loneliness and be stuck in a quiet darkness room or in our quiet hole, or we could just not be lonely and spread the love as just going through the flow, just going with it. And just keep that love connection on. Then you will never be alone. You will be able to help people. You'll be able to see more. You'll get a wide perspective. But sometimes you don't need anybody agreed. How can I be? What a word is I'm looking for? Anybody's
acceptance.
Acceptance, exactly. Thank you. Acceptance to feel that not loneliness, if you know what I mean. So it is a choice. You know, I mean, we need a girlfriend, you know, I mean, we need to get laid once in a while, you know, I mean, it does get kind of lonely sometimes, but hey, I mean, just the nature of the beast, we choose to, you know, I mean, you know, be lonely in that situation. That's why we got to step our game up, you know, I'm just playing. But yeah, I mean, it's a choice, you know, we got out there friends that, you know, that are out there to listen, or we could just find that hangout. Maybe we're just stuck in the wrong circle with people that don't want to listen. So you go out there, start observing the world, start observing people, start making friends. When people feel your vibe, they automatically feel that connect, and they want to be your friend, you know? So you, honestly, it comes down to, you don't have to look for him. It just flows through you. And when you stop the judgmental point, the judgmental instinct, you have a good grip on that ego, then everything goes out well, because you're not looking for to get judged, or you're not judging anybody. So you accept whoever, however they are. You know what I mean?
No, I totally agree. That's a very good point, and a very positive perspective too.
Yeah, I believe it's just the way how one look at it, you know. I mean, it's just, we could just try, show love, spread love, and just let it be, let it flow, let the love flow. Because,
well, I mean, I have my personal experiences. Like last week, I mean, I sometimes feel a little lonely being here in Berkeley. Well, when I left San Francisco, and I had so much friends over there, and I'm in transition in life, and in that point in life, it's like you want to connect with people, and when you practice the universal connection, because you are daily practicing establishing this unconditional love and learning how to work with precision through practicing with the windmill, like the one I have behind me.
which is correct.
It ends up being like a situation where things do become a very interestingly synchronistic, very harmonious. Like, for instance, I was working on my job, just in the whole body department, helping people find what they need when it comes to supplements and minerals. And so these two people come up, and I start talking to them about B12 vitamins and telling them what I know, and they immediately really enjoyed how I broke it down to them in a comprehensive way. So I ended up describing them a little bit more about who I am, that I actually practice self-mastery, and their eyes started lighting up. I told them, somehow I led it into the whole discussion of the universal connection, and their eyes both lit up even more. And it's not, some people would actually kind of hear it. It comes in from one ear, goes out from the other, because they have nothing to base upon it. They're not even pursuing yoga or qi gong or anything that actually resonates with energy mastery, or kind of like meditation that helps their soul.
Right.
But these two people were, and what ended up happening was that they really resonated with it, and I had a great discussion with them, and I told them about things, and I ended up getting their emails and sending them some information so they can follow up on that. And man, I mean, they have now the opportunity to connect with somebody who knows about this stuff. And for me, it's a matter that I don't have to, there's no reason to think that I could be lonely. Is that I'm really all the time experiencing my reality. I'm creating my reality at all times. So let's say if I'm right now, I don't have people around me, it's because I chose it. Just like you were saying, Billy. It's a choice. I choose. And so if I chose otherwise, I would just walk out of my room, stop being in this introvert type of mode, go out and be an extrovert, go out and find somebody in a yoga studio if I want to connect with those type of people, or go to a judo studio or something like that. Whatever you are inclined to go to, but essentially you find people who would be maybe close to this type of work that we're doing with the universal connection, but maybe they need that type of help to be introduced to it underneath.
That's what, in my point of view, sorry.
Yeah.
When it comes down to unconditional love, we are out there not to, we spread love, the word love. We try to share our knowledge with people in different platforms or out there in the streets or whatsoever. But the main root point is, as a human, go back then, what we're trying to do, we're trying to resonate this energy out of our system and connect it with the earth to heal the earth, the people, and everybody. In other words, we can say connected as well, you know. And what that's happening, the people you met, you literally heal them, energetically heal them, as by talking to them and showing them the knowledge.
Mhm.
Right.
It's kind of like the physician is entertaining the client
Right.
back to health. I mean, that's what
Right.
it really is, because if everything is an illusion, so if you go to a doctor and you're asking for them to help you, you're giving them the power to actually suggest to you a physical cause and a reaction. Something
Exactly.
to react and that you have a reaction for, but you actually, they're helping you auto-suggest that result. And all you
Right.
have to do is see yourself across. But it's a matter that sometimes what you're handling is not going to be from nature. And so
Exactly.
that goes into a different discussion.
Right. Empathy. Empathy is the key word, I would say. Become an empath. I mean, try to feel, try to connect with them, instead of trying to put them down or trying to judge them or trying to make them judge the other person because of what they did to them or not make them feel better. But it's more being an empath to them and trying to heal them in a sort of way.
Yeah. Well, the aspect of the ego, as I find it, is that the ego likes to express itself at all times. It likes to be in control in the sense where it doesn't always listen to others. It's sort of like wants to be the shining star. It wants to be out there. It wants the attention. It wants the success. It wants to be, like we were talking about, lust, that when you look at the perception or perspective of sound, of hearing, the sense of hearing, you can abuse it by somebody giving you flattering remarks about your performance. That boosts up your ego and makes you want to work even harder so you can get the same flattering and you can go back home feeling better because somebody externally from you has created that good emotion in you. So you will seek to recreate it again and again and again, but essentially you are really creating that emotion within you. And if you learn how to create it within you without the conditions, unconditional love,
any condition,
no condition,
correct.
That is where it is. Well, Daniel, I've been noticing that you've been posting some stuff on the chat. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so first of all, I don't know if I was posting 2 movies that show, that talk about the ego and then also preferences. The first one is Revolver. It's something that we mention often, or we've talked about with students before, because it's a movie that shows how the ego operates, and also just shows like the different thought patterns you can have and how the ego pops up when it thinks it's in danger. It pops up when it's trying to get you off balance. The other one is a series called Black Mirror, and there's an episode that shows preferences. I mean, it's an interesting perspective as far as like some analogies to society, but it shows preferences. So that's the point of me mentioning that. It also shows a little bit about thought structures too. But anyway, so to go off of a couple things that you guys had said, I think Josh had said something earlier about the automatic, how the ego is kind of automatic. Someone had mentioned this. It's automatic, and so we have to kind of just watch it, guide it. But I was thinking like the ego is constantly running through every single person, and most people don't know that it's them. And so it's automatic programming. So it's automatically programming, automatically choosing preferences that show up in your reality. And so if there's things that we don't like, we have to choose it. We have free will. If we don't like what our ego is creating, we can choose to rewrite the program or hardwire and rewrite it enough that we begin to hardwire our systems and the way we think, the way we act to be how we want to live. I mean, we will always have things coming in, signals coming in to try to bring us down or upset us or take us off balance. But if we're constantly choosing a positive thought, or we're constantly in a cycle of loving everything no matter what, and we practice every day, we're understanding how energy runs in our system, watching our cyclical thought patterns, we'll start to program our minds, our bodies, our energy systems, our actions, our life in a way that we just observe the ego. The ego can also help us navigate. That's one of the benefits of having an ego.
Yeah,
But-
we pretty much get it when we come in here. It's the self. The ego is the self. You'll take it with you anywhere you go. It's just a matter of
Oh, yeah.
programming it.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I
Yeah.
experienced.
Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead. No, let's go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying that in my past, I had some jobs that I worked with, and it might sound kind of sketchy, but I left my job because I didn't want to argue, because arguing is also kind of like a triggering an ego. It's like when it comes down to, for instance, somebody tried to put some kind of blame on me. You know, I have witnesses that knows my work, what I do, and I prove my work, in other words. But me, personally, inside of me, I don't do work to prove anything. It's just there. They could see it, and they could judge however they want to judge. I try not to even let it go through me. But somebody, for instance, is past 3-4 jobs or a county job, and put it like that. I work for this county, and there's a lot of judgmental calls, a lot of things said, which is really messes with a person's head. You know, I mean, psychologically. But somebody tried to say something to me and tell me, well, this is your problem, this is that. And I try not to argue anything about it or debate on it, because I just say, I'm just going to let it be. Hopefully karma does come back. Karma is the way, you know, you say something wrong, you do something wrong, how you send those signals, it will come back. But, you know, it will come back eventually. But I just pray through my heart that hopefully I'm just going to let this debate go, not let ego trigger me, and hopefully this karma will manifest the truth out of his mouth one day, or he will hopefully see his fate sooner or later. But I just let it be, let the love go, and just let it be and walk away.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, in a sense, what I see when it comes to the ego and its preferences, we create these preferences all the time. But what it's important to find is like this balance between effort and surrender, where you create a preference, and you know, because you meditate upon what you really want, because once you find out what you want, you're going to stick to it, and you're going to start programming it within you, and then you will enforce it with action. And then the action itself is so stronger than just the mere thought. The action itself is building memory and building a pattern that will then also be integrated within the nervous system. When it comes to the ego and trauma, which will be discussed in a separate webinar more on that topic, I wrote an entire paper about it too. It's that trauma itself is this energy of frustration, okay? We were attacked by somebody who comes from an egoic perception, and we are trying, because they are attacking us in some way, we are trying to fight or flee. So when we try to fight, it can become an argument, and then it can become very much dirty and nasty, and we end up reaching a rage, and then eventually a frustrated fight response.
That's where all the ego.
Because of that frustration, it's blocked, it's stored within our nervous system, and each time we see that person again, or we are entering into a certain similar topic or situation, that emerges again. It arouses our nervous system, and we start experiencing those uncomfortable emotions again. So we try to disassociate from it and isolate ourselves from that person or from that situation. We try to get away from it because it brings up really uncomfortable emotions. The same thing can be said about when we want to flee. When we want to flee somebody, he starts pursuing us and tries to enforce his opinion on us, and all we want to do is be left alone, but this person doesn't want to. So what can happen is a frustrated flight response, and that leads to emotions of helplessness. And that will eventually also be stored in the nervous system, programmed into the ego, into the body. And whenever we encounter the person again, or a situation or a topic, our nervous system arouses again, and we feel the same helplessness that we felt from the first time, from when we got that trauma for the first time. And so that also enters the whole aspect of the ego, that the ego itself, it's trying to work with us because it's part of us. And we're interested in having beautiful experiences in this planet. But there's so many people out there who are misusing their ego because of things like lust with all those five senses, abusing those and then abusing other people by creating all kinds of different advertisements that are too stark and too blunt and too gross or things like that that trigger us within, try to elicit from us a reaction. A self-mastery practitioner is where you realize that you need to control how you respond to things. Okay, you can either react to something or you can respond. There's a difference between them. And it's important. We'll discuss that more in next webinar about trauma and the universal connection. And I would like to wrap this up because we are over an hour long. Yes, Joy.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, hopefully it's not in this couple weeks, because I will be going to Mexico. I'm planning to go out there and see the pyramids. Hopefully, bring some experiences back and a couple other places. But I'll try my best to be at that webinar if I can, not be late as today, Right.
Okay, well, there'll be a recording, so you won't miss it.
Okay, awesome. Really nice to be here today, though.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us.
And my mic finally worked.
Well, thank you also, Jacob and Tyler and Daniel and Matt, and Josh, who left earlier because he had to go. If you have listened to us all this way through, anybody who's doing this webinar now, know that we are here and that we love you guys and that we encourage you to join our community so we can evolve together, understanding this universal connection, understanding what it takes to connect and how to, spread this love, spread this connection to others, and make it more available for people so we can all just reach the next stage of our evolution.
Unconditional love to all.
Unconditional love. Blessings.